Okay, so now we are going to look at the power of switches. Okay, and switches are really useful in our networks. Okay, if you want to make quick decisions and go from A to B very fast, then you're going to want to understand the power of switches. Okay, so first thing, what we're going to do is let's set up our visual network a little bit more. What I want to do is we're going to turn off our tx and ty right now. So you turn those expressions off so they're back to constant, so our rectangle's back in the middle of the screen. Then what I want you to do is go inside of your network and let's add a circle top. Okay, so we have this circle top and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add a transform and then we're going to null off our transform. Okay. Same convention with the name. So let's call this circle one main. Let's call this transform one main. And let's call this null one. We're going to call this null two visual. All right. We can also disable this viewer for a second. Now what I want to do is add a switch. Okay, and the first input should be our rectangle, and the second input should be our circle. We're going to add another null at the end. We're going to turn that viewer on. Okay, this is the null 3 visual. And now when we change our switch, we should be going between our circle top and our rectangle. Now, a couple other things. Let's go to our circle. And let's say we want to keep the adjustments that we made the same, right? So we changed our scale. So what we can do actually is we can copy this parameter and link them. And instead of pasting a reference, this time I'm going to paste a bind, which means that when I change one, I'm going to change the other. And this is good if you're doing like a lot of patterns or just trying to switch shapes. We want all of this to stay the same. So if we're gonna bind our reference or scale in the X and Y. Okay, so that way if we decide to change the scale, both things will be impacted, which is good when you're working with a lot of visuals. Okay, so now we switch. Oh, the other thing we need to change is our background. So if you see if we switch back to our circle. And also for the switch, one thing you can do is we are going to go to our, we're going to go to our comp, change our alpha to 1, comp over background color. Okay, so now when we go between, yeah, cool. We have that switch set up. So what we'd like to do here is we'd like to, and this isn't running, so we hit play. So we have everything moving. What we'd like to do is create a keyboard switch, okay, that's going to map into our switch top. So in order to do that, what we're going to do here is we're going to take a keyboard in chop again. we're going to map that to the number 3. Okay, no modifier keys. We just want it to be a pulse. Okay. And let's just add a null here in case we want to change that. So every time I hit the 3 key, you see that we have going from 0 to 1 or off to on. Now, essentially what I want to do is be able to run multiple things that I'm switching, right? And connect. So I could go here and just output this value to the index, right? And now every time I hit 3, going from the blue rectangle to the circle. Cool. I'm going to turn that off for a second. What I'd like to do is create a switch that's going to send a bunch of data, okay, around, just for organizational purposes and to keep this kind of easy. So how do we do that? We're going to create a couple more switches. Okay, so let's say that we wanted to switch between the LFO and the mouse control, the TX on button, right? So we look at the mouse in control. Okay, we have this TX and this TY. Now, if we look at our LFO motion, okay, we've split out this Rec1 TX, Rec1 TI. Now, the nice thing about TouchDesigner is that if we want to reference the same thing, we can use these names. We can reuse names over and over. So we want Rec1 TX, and then we want Rec1 TY. So now these channel names are the same. Essentially, we're trying to create a UI where these channel names don't change too much. All right, so let's put down our switch. And let's think about things that we're going to add and how we need to get it working. And then I'm just going to null. I always want to null to close it. Now the error is saying that there's no inputs. So what we want to do is we want to take our motion TX, our motion TY, and then our color values and be able to switch them so that we're still keeping some of our color values, but then we can also use mouse control on a button press. Okay, I know it sounds like a lot, but it's not too bad. What we're going to do first is we're going to use a merge. Okay, so we're going to take all of our information up here, which is our motion TX, our motion TY, and our color values, and place them all in a merge. Okay, so that's kind of essentially the values that we want to send: our TX motion, our TY motion, and our RGB. And we want to send that as one specific set of values into our switch. Now, what we need to be mindful of is if we're referencing expressions, we want to keep our names the same, right? So again, down here, we've already changed our Rec1 TX and our Rec1 TY. And then we also have these keyboard inputs. So what we need to do is we're going to create another merge down here. Okay, and we're going to take our UI control, plug that in. We're going to take our keyboard controls and plug that in. And then we're also going to take a select chop and branch off of our color Okay, and I only want the G and the B. So now I can just take these two values and I'm going to send them in here. Okay, and if you really want to be um, a stickler about order, we could move this, so I could delete, disconnect these, and I'm going to put in my select second. Okay. Now this keyboard control is already in, and then I could have my third keyboard control. It doesn't really matter. It's really up to you how you like to stay organized. Okay. Now, what do we do from here? So the easiest thing to do is we're going to take this merge and plug it in first. Okay. So this will send these values out. And then we also have a second merge that if we switch, okay, now you can see that we're sending some of the values out. We're sending the G and B that we selected, and then we're also sending a mouse version of TX. But the main thing is that the values for Rect1 TX and Rect1 TY are the same. Okay, that's the main thing. And then the color values are also the same. Okay, and then we also have some keyboard entries here that will do some stuff. Okay, so like we said, we want to take our key 3 and plug that into our switch. So we're going to activate our viewer. Okay, plug that into the switch, and now when we hit 3, okay, that's going to change the shape. Now the other thing we want is we want this motion. So let's go back and oh, there's one other thing we need to do before we switch that. Okay, so what we also need to do here is we're going to take our null for our keyboard input, and we can also send that in to the other merge. And so now, even when we switch our index, okay, we're not losing our key. Okay. And the other thing, what we're going to do here is we're going to add in a keyboard, one more keyboard in. We can null it just to be safe. And again, we can plug that into our merge, plug that in to both. Okay. So now we have 2 keys, and we're going to set this keyboard in to the number 2. So that way we can send something when we hit the number 2. And when we hit the number 2, what we actually want to impact is this switch. So we can take the number 2, plug it in. Oh, we're going to get a loop because it's after. So good. I wanted to show you this error. So what we're going to do is let's actually undo that. Okay. And what we want to do is take our keyboard 2 from before the switch. We can just plug it here. There we go. And now you have a switch. Okay. So basically you just want to make sure that when you have your switch active, that you're not losing the values or numbers that you need to impact. So the last part is now we have our TX and TY, right? We have this TX and TY. If we turn these back on, okay, they're not going to work because we've done some renaming. So what we're going to do is go back to our null here. We're going to turn the viewer active, right? And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to map our rec1, map our rec2. So what happens? We press a button. As you can see, the LFO is driving, but then when we hold down the number 2, okay, if we want to pulse, that's still coming from key 1. Okay, and then if we wanted to transform the circle. Now, the circle's not moving, and all we need to do to pulse the same animations is drop our translate from rec1, and now when we hold, and then if we hold 3, we'll switch to our circle. If we hold 3 and 2, now our mouse is driving everything. Okay, and then the keyboard 1 is still pulsing color, right? And so how can we drive that pulse to also impact? So we can copy this parameter here, and then we can paste this parameter also, or bind, either one. We can bind it. So now, no matter what, if we switch our color, we can pulse, right? We can use the buttons to switch to move our mouse, and then we can pulse different colors. And the final thing would be to, again, we can just add our references. You can do it either way. We can add it here for colors. So let's say we wanted to drive the color from here instead. We can just paste this reference here, paste this reference here. And we can do the same thing for our circle. We can paste the G, and then we can paste the E. Okay, so now you have shapes that you can trigger, you can maneuver just using your mouse, you can pulse, and you can change and pulse just by holding different keys. And these are all by holding the 1, 2, and 3 keys.